Hello and welcome. This is Pastor Ken Ortize, and here we are at the beginning of a new week, very close to the beginning of a new year. I pray that you had a great holiday celebration, a great Christmas celebration. We did. We had a great time at church on Christmas Eve, and my wife and I did something we haven't done in years. We spent Christmas Day home alone, not in the scary sense of the movie, but we had a great time. Over the last year, we've spent so much time traversing the planet, we decided that this would be a great opportunity just for the two of us to hang out and have a casual Christmas dinner together. So we put a small turkey on the Traeger and smoked it. And it was a great, quiet, wonderful time. As far as gifts go, I got everything I wanted because I really didn't want anything. So anything I got was exactly what I wanted. So it worked out great. So I pray that you had a great time if you were family or friends, or even if you were like us, you were kind of home alone. It's such a great time sometimes just to rekindle the friendships and the intimacy that so easily gets gobbled up in this busy, crazy, harried world that we live in today. And in saying that, we've been talking over the last few weeks about the idea of relationships and their central place in our life, particularly as Paul really made them the focal point of how a Christian can practically live out their day-to-day faith. We've been talking specifically about the most important and central relationship, and that's the relationship of a man with his wife or a wife with her husband. I speak this, of course, in terms of people who are married. In the theological sense or spiritual sense, our most central relationship is Christ. And yet, one of the things we have to come to grips with is that our relationship with Christ and the depth of that relationship is predicated to a large degree on our interaction with the people around us. So whether you're married or not, these guidances that he gives us are really important to understand in terms of all of our interactions. So what we've been talking about is the central one of that relationship of a man to his wife and a wife to her husband, the marriage relationship. But secondarily, we're going to move on into talking about the relationship within the family, parent-child relationships, which, really, as many of you know, have their own set of challenges and difficulties. And then we're going to move on to the third area where it talks about the relationship of people in the marketplace. Now, again, the context is slaves and masters, but I think there's a direct parallel that's useful to us. In the very last part, as we get to the end of our study of Ephesians in sometime in the distant future, we're going to talk about the relationship with Christ, but particularly our role in the spiritual battle, and seeing that the life on this earth is not intended by God to be a playground, but rather, as A.W. Tozer said, it's a battlefield. And that's why Paul would say to Timothy, fight the good fight of faith, that we are engaged in a conflict. And the greater goal in all of this is not to simply live my best life now or to be as happy as I can possibly be in this little fragment of time that I have been given called my lifetime, but it's about learning to see the value of living for Christ. Like the old adage says, one life will soon be past and that which is done for Christ will last. And so we really want to redeem the time, as Paul put it, that take advantage of the time that we have. So whether you're 8 or you're 80, it's never too late. And it's never too soon to start developing a deeper relationship with God and really kind of learning how to live the love of God out in our relationship with other people. In fact, that's what we left off talking about last week, was the fact that we're called to love one another as Christ has loved his church. And I've had ladies say, that I'm called to be submissive to my husband, and that's such a hard challenge. But I often challenge them by saying, think about how challenging it is for your husband to love you as Christ loved the church. The perfect example of loving, and it involves the sacrifice and laying down of his life. I've never found a woman who didn't want to submit and respect a husband who was laying his life down for her. I mean, submission is not hard if the person you're supposed to be submitting to is dedicated to doing everything he can to enrich you, to bless you, to bring you to the fullness of everything that God wants you to be. Essentially, loving somebody like Christ you become their servant, their slave. You lay your life down for them, and so that they can move ahead. Well, So as we looked at that, we talked all of last week about all the different ways in which we love each other. And four particular things I mentioned. We need to appreciate one another. We need to show regard for one another, which the word literally means to gaze at. We need to appreciate or have affection for somebody else. That there's a real intimacy, not only mentally and socially and relationally, but there's an intimacy physically that exists in a loving relationship. And then last of all, we show concern. We don't make decisions without bringing into the concerns of the other person. I think in particular about when my wife and I would be looking for homes as we moved various times. I mean, most people don't realize it. Before we settled in our home that we've been in the last almost 40 years, we had moved 17 times. And so we were pretty peripatetic. We were kind of moving from place to place. We served in different cities and different churches and even in different ministries over the years, until finally God brought us to Calvary Spokane, and we understood at that point this is probably where we were going to live out the duration of our life in our ministry and service to Him. But it's that whole idea that when we would go look for a place to live, a home usually, I understood as my responsibility to help my wife locate and find the home that would provide her with the most comfort possible in raising our children. And I cared very little about what accommodations there were for me, what space there was for me. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't want to have a comfortable place to study and read and so forth, but that wasn't my primary concern. That as we talked about the old saying, a happy wife, a happy life. Well, in a sense, when my wife knows I'm concerned and it's saying, what is it that you want? And we do this with everything. I concern myself with the cars we drive, where we live, the vacations we take, what we do in those vacations, how we organize our life around our own personal time and a time we spend with family and friends and others. I do none of those things by myself. I do them in partnership with my wife. And so my overweening concern is always, what would make her the happiest? What would be the most comfortable? Because pleasing her is what pleases me the most. I wish I'd say I'm 100% successful in that, but because oftentimes I think I'm doing just what she wants and I find out she didn't want that at all. It's kind of why I stopped trying to shop for clothing for my wife. I mean, when she said, "Did you really think I would wear this?" I realized that I was so far off the beam, and so I rely upon daughter-in-laws to help me with those kind of situations and questions now. But anyway, getting back to our point, what we find today is that Paul begins to move the issue of loving in people into really one of its most perfect expressions, and that's unity. He says in verse 31, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Most people don't think of this as being a statement about loving another person, but it is centrally so. So anyway, I'm going to kind of bring it to a close here, but tomorrow I want to pick up our conversation about this particular passage because it really is central to understanding how we structure our lives in this world in a way that enables us to have the greatest opportunity and chance for success as a married couple and as a family. So God bless you, and we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Many blessings.